The point of building the network is that you are keeping in touch with that person over time.
How to convert these superficial conversations into meaningful, impactful relationships that, we get closer to the opportunities it gets along with it.
So for me, I try with great intent to find a different starting point instead of work. If you can't explain to yourself why you are asking the question, you're not ready to ask the question.
Some of them are straight into asking for a business relationship, and that frustrates me as well. But the ones who are honest, which just says, hey, I've seen your profile, or your name was mentioned, or I've seen some of the press articles that you've done. Be a little bit specific, not, hey, can we catch up and just shoot the breeze?
There's this hesitance about being of inconvenience. Do I even deserve? Welcome to Raw with Uma, and I'm Uma, your host and architect of Raw Leadership, here to bring you unfiltered, unrehearsed, unscripted conversations with women about what really goes on in navigating life and work. Are you ready? Let's get raw. So my guest today is dialing in from India, and I have Divya on the line. Hi, Divya.
Good morning, Uma. Nice to connect with you. I'm dialing in from Bangalore today, and it's a lovely morning here, and it's so amazing to be with you on this call.
It's very nice to meet you. We've actually never met before, so I'm looking forward to get to know you and the questions that you have. But maybe we'll start with a little bit about yourself first. So tell us a little bit about your story and why you decided to come on the show.
Sure. So born and brought up in India, Pune, and now residing in Bangalore from 20 years. Professionally, I'm a senior engineering manager with VMware by Broadcom. In last recent years, I bootstrapped and built the India team to deliver on cloud technology. Personally, I'm a mother of a teenage daughter, and it's a reverse mentoring every day. I'm learning new things from her. That keeps me exciting. Beyond this, I am also an avid meditator and also facilitate meditation sessions. I love reading your post on LinkedIn, Uma. We've never met, but I'm so inspired by your post every day. And I said, why not take this opportunity to have these deep conversation sessions with you and learn something more. So thank you for having me.
Oh, well, it's so great to have you, and thank you for the kind words. And it's interesting because it seems we used to work for the same company, but we actually have never met. So it's nice to now meet you. So welcome to the show. And let's start with your first question.
Yes, it's all about networking today.
Okay.
Right? And the first word that comes in mind to people when we talk networking is, oh, it's hard. Oh, it's awkward. It's superficial, right? But I would love to know from you how to convert these superficial conversations into meaningful, impactful relationships so that, we get closer to the opportunities it gets along with it.
Yeah, and networking is an interesting one because, as one of my friends would call it, it's another form of work for women. So there's the housework, there's the office work, there's beauty work, and there's network. The most challenging part is the starting point of the conversation. And we typically start with, what do we do at work? And then it progresses to a limited space of a conversation. So I try, and I say try because I'm an introvert, and my co-host today might say he's an extrovert, so we'll be listening to what he has to say about this. So I try with great intent to be curious and try a different starting point. But also, I just left the corporate world, and the day after I signed my redundancy, I was at this event, and everyone went around introducing themselves, and I could not say, Uma, so-and-so title from VMware. So I said, instead, I defaulted to my nonprofit, which is Lean in Singapore. But then I went back and I was like, well, what could I have said in introducing myself because we tie so much of our identity at work. So one is the starting point in a conversation that tries to move away from our work identity. So what might that be? And then second, I think a lot of times with women networking, we're already pressed for time. And majority of our conversation ends up being about kids and holidays and husbands, maybe, or life partners and other things, food, shopping, all of those things. So I think thinking about the intent of your networking, because I think when men network, they form alliances. And for women, we aren't thinking about that. In fact, when I ask a woman who's asking for my time, what is it that I can do for you? It is a huge shock because they never think about asking for something. And that is the point of networking and having the different networks. You have your social networks, you've got the business networks and other forms of networking. So for me, I try with great intent to find a different starting point instead of work, so that it can be a more interesting and holistic conversation. And I also think about, I remember one of my mentors said to me, Uma, every time I meet a person, I think about what I have to offer them and what I might ask for them that they have to offer me. And yes, it does sound transactional, but that is the point of forming alliances. And it can be a small of an ask, no matter what that looks like, to something that's really important to you at that point in time.
When we are talking to seniors, right, most of the times we think that what is there for me to offer? What value can I bring to a senior? Maybe if you're looking for a connect, for mentoring, or even sponsorship. How do you find that common ground and make that a mutual relationship?
Yeah. I think first is not to have the pressure on yourself that you have to deliver that value immediately. One of my mentors, just this week, someone reached out to me to ask him if he would be interested to be a judge in a startup competition focused on AI. And so I went to him with that opportunity and he said yes. So I think there isn't anything that's time bound in that immediate interaction that you must deliver value immediately. The point of building the network is that you are keeping in touch with that person over time. And you may have an opportunity to give them, like the example I just gave, other things. Because someone knows that you know this person, they might use you as a point of contact. Or there might be other things that come up in your conversation. That's why the starting point of not starting with work is important.
So how do you put yourself out there?
Yeah, the only way people are going to know about you and what you do is if you tell them that you exist and what you do. So, this concept of working really hard and expecting your manager to do everything for you, it no longer exists and hasn't existed for a very long time. So the ability to advocate for yourself, it's super important. And I know it's very uncomfortable, especially for women, because our starting point is that we already don't deserve to be there. And so we are paddling so hard to prove ourselves every day that we work even harder to deliver the same outcome as men. And then to say, now you got to go promote your work and talk about your work. And not just within your team and your manager and your manager's manager, by the way, but also laterally to other colleagues. So I think finding those opportunities, whether there's a project that you did that you would like to send an email out and inform, people outside of your chain of command or your team. It can be a simple, message to your peers to say, hey, FYI, you might find this interesting. If you'd love to chat about how we could collaborate, let's do a 15-minute coffee. something like that. So yes, you have to make that effort to actually build the lateral relationships, which I think is a very important question that you raise, because a lot of times when we think about networking internally, we think about chain of command networking versus lateral, the people that are peers to your bosses, the people that are peers to you. And so consciously making sure that, hey, do they know you exist in the first place? And what is it that you do? And then the key projects that you are across, so that they know the association in their mind. You have to remember that, every human being at any one point, we can only retain like 40 bits of information. So the recency bias, what do I know recently? How much can I hold comes into play. So if these are important people that you want in your network, there has to be some touch points, if you like, that you are interacting with them, whether it's a 5-minute chat in the pantry or a coffee or a phone call or a FYI message, something to keep engaging with them, right? So that's one. Externally, the best network sits on LinkedIn. And if you want people to know about you, you have to be visible on LinkedIn. I know a lot of people hesitate with this. There's 1 billion users on LinkedIn. Only 1% are considered creators, and a small subset of that active creators. So yes, you have to put yourself out there on social media as well, because if you want people to know that you exist, what is it that you do, you have to talk about you have to talk about your work, but in a way that represents your voice. And the biggest thing that has helped me is actually not caring what people think. And I'm not doing it for the likes or impressions. I'm doing it because it's a topic that I care about, that I want to put out there.
Thank you. Survey shows that women can make that first connection. What is difficult is when I want to ask something or reach out and leverage that, is when I, back out and say, oh, should I do it? How can one overcome that challenge and leverage, as they call it, the network?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we all need to remind ourselves, and by the way, I'm totally with you, because a lot of times I will compose a message to ask for something, and then I can't even press send on it because I'm cringing inside to like, oh my gosh, can I even ask for this? And so then I remind myself that every other person is asking. So if I don't ask, I'm going to miss out. And what's the worst that could happen? I always think about worst case scenarios. Worst case scenario, I don't get a response, right? Even if the person says no, it's still a response. And for me, that's positive. But at least I asked. So I try and operate on the premise of ask and you shall most likely receive, because if we don't ask, we don't even give the opportunity to the other person to even say yes to us. So the starting point has to be to ask. And then it opens up a conversation. No matter where that leads to, at least you have created that opportunity for yourself. So I think that's kind of my inner voice, and what I tell myself is that somebody else is asking, many others are asking. And if I don't ask, I'm just going to lose out. And what's the worst that could happen?
So I'll tell you the next challenge that I face generally, right? In my network, I know who can help me. But maybe because of lack of time, I have not been in touch with that person, right? It's been a long time since I've contacted. And I feel that if I ask, will I look, oh, I'm reaching out only because I have some work, because I have not been in touch. How do you overcome these, scenarios?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I don't think anyone expects us to stay in touch with everyone that we know, because it's impossible. So you are not alone in not keeping in touch with people. So that's the first thing to remember. The second thing is, the formula I like to use is to say, hey, we haven't spoken in a few years, whatever that time period is, I've always admired, insert the thing that you are about to ask for, related to that topic. I've always admired that you were so great at public speaking. And I'm about to go do my first speech. And I was wondering if you could give me 15 minutes of your time to teach me tricks of the trade, because clearly you are one of the best out there. So it's a compliment in the ask. If you can't explain to yourself why you are asking the question, you're not ready to ask the question. I think that's a good way to think about it. It's like, okay, why am I asking this question? Why is this important to me? What exactly am I asking? And what is it that I want to get out of it? What would a good answer look like so that I can formulate the question? Because the answer has to be helpful to you. Otherwise, then you just wasted your time as well. My co-host today is Bjorn Engelhardt, and he would say he's a self-confessed travel, food, and cycling geek. I think he missed out wine. Who has been leading enterprise technology companies across Asia Pacific for the past 25 years. He's driven by curiosity of people and technology. He would say also that his greatest reward comes from watching people develop and often move to new companies in larger and gaining more responsibility in their roles. I would be one of many examples of that. Over the past decade, Bjorn has become actively engaged in creating more diverse and creating parity in the workforce, and in particular, creating opportunities for women. As an original co-founder of He for She in Singapore, which began with a journey of awareness, but also a passion to help bring that awareness to everyone and bringing change and results to gender parity. A lot of this, I know, is driven by his own children, especially watching his daughter face the challenges that too many women have to deal with. Bjorn, welcome to the show, and it's great to have you.
Thank you.
A lot of people may not know is that many years ago, 2016, in August, is when I joined to work for you.
Actually, I thought it was 2015, but it probably was somewhere in 2016, yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't an easy journey. It was a lot of hard work for me to convince you.
Yes. You probably remember the story better than I do.
Yes.
I negotiated well.
You certainly did, actually.
Now, we're talking about networks today. And you and I actually did not know each other, right? And somehow you found me. Was it through the recruiter?
No, I was through a common person we both know.
Oh, yes.
One of Singapore's leading technology executives.
Yes.
I think probably an old boss of yours as well, Steve Leonard, also was a part of Connecting.
Yes.
And a old boss of mine as well. So I think the network actually worked absolutely perfectly then.
Yeah. So Steve was my boss's boss. And I think you're talking about Bill.
Yeah.
Who is a mentor.
Yeah.
And someone who was in a capacity where I was building the relationship and partnership with his company. Mm-hmm. So a couple of people dropped my name, and then somehow I surfaced. We have a conversation, I get hired, right? But this is the point of networks.
Yeah, I would say just having sometimes a network. Yes, there are different gradients and shades of where the network is it business orientated, is it personal. But I find in my life, my business networks often become personal networks. My personal networks often become business networks. The industry changes a lot. The world is changing a lot, and people I thought I would never work with, I've ended up working with or partnering with. People I thought I'd probably never be friends with. You end up, it's in strange situations. You go, hey, we've got a lot in common.
Yeah, and I wonder in that point you just said about the business network becoming a friends network and vice versa, whether that happens as much for women, because men network differently. You have golf, you can drink whiskey together, you can afford to spend the time after work as well, right? And when women network, first we have to put aside the time, then we have to consciously think about, okay, sometimes I'm a minority in this situation. Sometimes I walk into a room and everybody else feels more accomplished. The little voice in your head that's holding you back, the sticky floor, and all those elements. And I'm trying to think about my own network. And a lot of my friends did actually come from work. But I have to say I network like a man because, yeah.
I don't, look, I think intellectually understand what you're saying. It's very difficult for me to relate that and say, because, obviously I've grown up in a particular environment. But I'd say I look at it a little differently. I get up most mornings at 5 o'clock and go cycling. And the group is 50% men, 50% women, different industries, and you have conversations with people. Sometimes they're completely just random conversations, but you're learning to talk to people about different topics.
Yeah.
And from there, you understand what people, the inquisitiveness and the curiosity, you understand what they do. And you were talking about that before with Divya. It's really got to be curious. You need to understand a little bit more. It's not about hey, nice to meet you on this bike ride. What can you do for me? In fact, it's just using cycling. We have a written rule that you're not selling to anybody. You're there just to talk and chit chat.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not a traditionalist to sit around and drink whiskey and play golf. I used to play golf. I find it a waste of time. I don't mind a glass of whiskey at home, but I don't like that with networking. I'll get up and walk with people in the morning. I'll make a point of doing that in the city. Yesterday morning, I was out with an ex-colleague and we walked around the botanical gardens and talked a little bit personal, a little bit about business, a little bit about politics, etc. So I think it's finding the time and what works for you, as it's not the whole answer to it, but you have to start meeting and keeping in contact with people. I think is super important.
Yeah. I find that it's also important to make the most out of opportunities that aren't so obvious. So you and I are now talking about Divya. So my hope is that Divya is going to send you a LinkedIn Connect and she's going to write you a message that's going to say something. That's going to be my next question. That is going to compel you to give her the time, right? If she wants to network with you. So for anyone out there, and they're listening to the show right now, so I want to connect with Bjorn, right? Instead of the standard connect, don't say a message on LinkedIn. If I were to craft something to write to you, because I want 15 minutes of your time to talk about something. And I think 15 minutes is perfect because it helps you get to the point. And it's not too much to ask of a busy senior person. What would that message sound like?
Well, for Divya, it's definitely going to have to include a photo of today's session.
Yes.
Because you gave her that tip.
Yes.
It's an interesting one. I get tens of messages a day on LinkedIn. Most of them are from B2B market lead generation people, and most of them get deleted. The hard part is sifting through LinkedIn. But I do look at LinkedIn on a regular basis. I do answer my emails. My email's available. It's on my LinkedIn profile, and I always encourage people to send me an email directly rather than LinkedIn, because there is a danger that LinkedIn you get flooded and spammed with too much stuff in there. What would be the ones I kind of get frustrated with are, let's start with those. They're the ones that simply say, "Hi, it's great to connect."
Yeah.
Okay, why? It's like, thanks. I didn't feel anything better out of this.
What could you possibly say to that? Right?
Yeah, well, sometimes I look at their profile, I press it, I'm interested. I'm just naturally curious about people, and you are right. I mean, I am an extrovert if I do Myers-Briggs, but it doesn't mean it's easier to network. It just means I get energy from it, and I enjoy learning about people out there. Some of them are straight into asking for a business relationship, and that frustrates me as well. But the ones who are honest, there is a degree of genuine honesty and sometimes authenticity or rawness in there, which just says, "Hey, I've seen your profile, or your name was mentioned, or I've seen some of the press articles that you've done, or you just seem to have done things that are interesting to me." You talked about it before, is be a little bit specific, not, hey, can we catch up and just shoot the breeze? But I'm interested in your experience in Asia. I'm interested in your experiences in growing startups. I'm interested in cybersecurity or leadership or something. They're the ones that are authentic. If it's too fancy, then it's usually ChatGPT or someone's written it or cut and paste it. If there's a degree of authenticity that says, I'm after this and why they're after it, then I'll give time to anybody.
Yeah.
I think you know that. I love giving time to people.
Yes.
I think if I was one tip there, a lot of people don't follow up. They say, sure, I'd love to, and then they let it die.
Yeah. Okay. I love that you brought that up because, this year I did walk the talk and I found 88 C-suite men, you were one of them, to sponsor 2 to 3 women each. And I heard back recently from a lot of those men that the women didn't follow up. And when I spoke to some of the women, there's this hesitance about being of inconvenience. This again is this, do I even deserve this person's time because this person is important and carries a big title and etc. And what they don't realize is that by not following up, you are actually sending a negative impression about yourself, right? Like one sponsor, one of the guys said to me, like, yeah, person A followed up, but I haven't heard from person B. So you can already sense in his tone that he's not impressed. So now you got to work even harder to get back to a neutral position.
Yeah, I had three women I went for a walk with. We had great conversations. I got 3 LinkedIn requests. One did ask, say, can I follow up? And I said, sure, let me know when you want to. And I must admit, I questioned myself as like, did I not add any value to this conversation? And then that sort of makes me feel like, okay, well, should I offer myself again as a mentor or as or put my to help out there? I think it's okay to ask, and it's look, we're all busy, and we talked about it before that people are busy, they miss things, and so sometimes you have to follow up. The other thing I think here particularly in Asia and other parts, is the cultural thing. I don't want to push too hard. I want to be. You see that in emails, a polite reminder. Could you follow up on that? You go to other countries, it's like, hey, you haven't done this. I sent you an email, or so just being a little bit more willing to just ask and be a little clearer in the ask. Say, hey, is there a chance? I asked you about this previously. Is there a chance you could help me out? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think Divya made an interesting point that with social media and the amount of press we've got, the world is flattening. And so, the way we used to have very siloed cultural barriers, I think they're still relevant, but they're probably disappearing in a lot of ways. That particularly people in the tech industry and global industries, we're used to dealing cross-border. And so you can be a little bit more assertive sometimes when you ask. I think it's perfectly okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So breaking it down for anyone listening, but especially women out there, and if you've met somebody who has given you their time, please follow up. And I highly recommend using this template to say, it was great to meet you at this event on this date. Ideally, you have a photo that you can send, which personalizes it. And then say one thing about the most helpful thing you thought that person gave you. Because, imagine, right, Bjorn, and I've written to you many times and I've said, hey, or sometimes I come up to you after a meeting and say, hey, that one thing that you said that was super useful and here's why. It really makes you feel good that something you said was of use to me.
It sure does. It makes me feel good. And I think it's the inverse. If people don't follow up, as I said before, you start questioning yourself. And the last thing you want to do is people saying, oh, look, I probably haven't got time this time.
Yeah. Exactly. And then when you do it over writing, thanks to social media and text messaging, you're not going to remember someone you met 6 months ago, maybe. You're going to scroll back to that last message. And so if that person comes back to you and say, hey, I thought of another question, would you please give me 15 minutes? Here's something I'd like to discuss with you about. You're more likely to give the time again. So you get to meet a lot of people. Some will be more interesting to you than others, some that you will choose to stay in touch with. And if you're meeting them for the first time and you've done an engagement with them and you want to follow up later, right? Because we're all busy, you're busy. And what are some of the ways, tools that you use to follow up with specific individuals that you want to keep in touch with after you meet them for the first time?
Putting LinkedIn aside, because everybody does that. Yeah, you're one of 1 billion
LinkedIn's
people.
a great tool.
No, it's an awesome tool if you use it properly.
Yeah.
I have noticed though that LinkedIn's become a lot about I'm starting a new job or look at this, etc. And I think LinkedIn, if I went back 2 years, and I would encourage people is to come out with a point of view. Don't just promote that you've started a new job. Don't just put on there that my company's press release is this, but have something to say. That's, I think, is out of the 99% who don't use LinkedIn well, they're either doing nothing or just pushing out generic information. I'm a serial WhatsApper.
Okay.
And back to Divya's point about how do you keep in contact with people, I'd have, if I said I had thousands, look, if I looked at Facebook, for example, I've got thousands of friends, people that some I know well and most I don't know well, same. But I do WhatsApp a lot of people. I've got probably hundreds and hundreds of people that I would know face if I recognized them, and I could never see them. And so I WhatsApp, you said you create groups with people, you, Uma, and we've been on groups and companies that we've worked at before, or whether it was he for she or other things. And you can sometimes just ping a message, and nobody expects 20-minute conversation from a WhatsApp. Hey, Uma, how are you going?
Yes.
I did that with Alistair yesterday. We just, over the last 2 weeks, we just pinged a few messages. Hey, how you going? You got time for a walk or a chat? Done.
Yeah.
And I think that's, people expect today with messaging services to be quick and sharp and to the point, and you can cover a lot of people. If you're riding a bus in somewhere, a train, or you're sitting before a meeting, you can ping out to 10 people in your network.
Yes.
I'm off to Hong Kong next week. I sat yesterday, I had sort of 10 minutes while I was watching a bit of TV, and I pinged messages to 10 people, 15 people, say, I'm in Hong Kong. If you got time, let's just try and catch up for a coffee or something. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I'm traveling next week to Europe. So, I pinged, I did the same thing. I love that because I think messaging gives you the space to interact asynchronously. And I think we underestimate how much can get done async. And we think that everything needs to be live and, in person even, or a live call in order to get something done.
Yeah, I sometimes I love talking to people, but sometimes I just want to be quiet. But I do like a few quick messages because you are keeping that heartbeat alive between people. Even some of my best friends, the fact that it may be a 2-liner once a week.
Yeah.
We never used to be able to do that, right? It used to be formal conversations. It used to be, we would travel, etc.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we're busy and we just want our own space and time, and that kind of conflicts with networking.
Yeah.
But I think you can use the technology to be more efficient, keep in touch. I feel good when I get a message from somebody I haven't seen for 2 years and they say, hey, I just saw you or thought about you. And you go, well, that's cool.
Yeah. And you can leave a voice memo too. Like if you want to leave a longer message and you don't want to type it out because we can say so many more words if we speak it out. You can leave a voice memo, which now is also available on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I've got a friend of mine does that, and I haven't quite progressed to that level yet. But
yeah. So, yes, technology, and I know you're a big supporter of technology and love technology, so you're always trying new things. But yes, I love this concept of using messaging systems, whatever that is in your country, whatever that platform is, whether it's social media or WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or LinkedIn or any others that might be out there that I don't even know about? Line.
Line, there's
Yes, there's many
Moxie,
others.
there's WhatsApp, there's
Yes.
WeChat, there's a lot of
Yes.
yeah. But again, I go back to have a purpose as well. Sometimes it depends where you fit. I have my inner circle of friends. You have this kind of ever growing where you have less relationship or ongoing things in common with them. And if someone just says, "Hi, how are you?" It's like, okay, that's nice again. There's usually if you're networking and there's not somebody that you could feel that comfortable just picking up the phone and shooting the breeze with, then have a purpose in that message.
Yeah. Which goes beyond, "Hi, how are you?"
Yeah, I was at RSA, the security conference back in May. And there are people I used to work with and knew might be there, an old boss of mine, and he's in my not my Rolodex because no one has a Rolodex anymore. He's in my contacts on my phone, and I pinged him and said, "Hey, look, I'm at RSA. Are you at RSA? I'd like to learn a little bit more about what you're doing. And you got time for a coffee and just see how you are."
Yeah.
But a bit of a purpose as opposed to just social or just an open hi as well.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. I think that's a good point. I do get "Hi, how are you?" on LinkedIn, and I don't have time to respond to those. The first thing I think about is, tell me what you want, so I can help you, right? Because obviously you're reaching out for something, so come with a purpose. I like that.
Yeah, come with a purpose and come with sharing something. As I said, I'm a bit of a Facebooker because it gives me a chance that if I'm meeting somebody, I said, you kind of can speed date catching up on what they've been up to. I don't like to see people sharing videos and other things. I like the authentic things. This is what I did, etc. Doesn't always have to be food shots, but again, it allows me to understand where that person is and saying, "Hey, let's have a quick conversation. I saw you in this town." There is no one answer for it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of whatever works for you and works for your network and the people that I guess that you use the term the audience or that you're trying to address or deal with. You have to figure out the right way. There are plenty of tools. How you use them and your persistence. It's never I've put a bunch of posts out or I've done this once. It takes a long time, as you know, with LinkedIn to become ranked high in their scoring system.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Bjorn. It was great to talk to you today, and I'm sure Divya found that very useful, and I'm sure many out there are going to find some of the tips that we talked about today extremely usable. With that, I'm going to close out the show today. So if you are hearing this message, you've listened to a new episode all the way to the end. And for that, I thank you for the generosity of your time. To wrap up, here are a few points from this episode. We actually just talked about how to show up authentically. Come with a point of view if you're trying to build that network on social media especially. And if you're thinking about networking, think about these few tips. We talked about taking a photo with the person you met, following up with a message. After that, use whatever platform works best for you. And then send a quick message about something useful that you took away from the conversation, if there was any. And async messaging. Super useful in networking because it just gives the time and space for anyone that you are talking to respond when they would like to. What else did you take away from this conversation? I'd love to hear what you think, so please follow, like, and leave a comment, and I promise to read all of them. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your friends, and if you'd like to be a guest on the show, check out the link to send in your details. See you soon.